Claire always believed her life had started quietly, the way a calm lake hides its depth beneath still water. She lived with her husband Daniel in a small town in Vermont, where days moved fast but emotions stayed buried. Daniel was a man of habits: morning coffee at exactly 7, evening walks at the same path, and a camera always in his hands. He recorded everything, not as a job, but as a need. Claire remembered when it first began, just after their wedding, when he said memories fade but recordings last. At that time, she had smiled and agreed. She thought it meant he cared deeply. In those early years, she didn't mind the lens following her laughter, her quiet moments, even her tired sighs. But slowly, something changed. Daniel stopped reacting. He didn't interrupt moments, he documented them. He didn't ask questions, he zoomed in. When Claire spoke about her feelings, he nodded but kept filming. Their home stayed peaceful, but it also felt empty, like a place waiting for something that never arrived. Claire filled her days with routine, yet inside her chest, there was a growing space she could not name. That space pushed her to volunteer at a local community arts center, a simple place filled with paint, music, and people who talked with warmth instead of silence. The center became her escape, not because she wanted to leave her marriage, but because she wanted to feel present again. She laughed there, talked freely, and shared small pieces of herself she had forgotten. Daniel knew where she went. He never questioned it. One evening, Claire noticed him standing quietly at the back of the center, filming her from a distance as she spoke with others. She felt a strange mix of comfort and sadness. He wasn't angry. He wasn't upset. He just watched. Later that night, when she asked why he never stopped her, never asked her to stay, never showed worry, Daniel answered in a calm voice that stayed with her long after. He said he wanted to see who she was becoming. Those words were not cruel, but they were cold. In that moment, Claire felt the first crack in something she had been holding together for years. She realized that being watched without being held was its own kind of loneliness. That night, as Daniel reviewed his recordings while sitting beside her, Claire stared at the ceiling and understood that the story of her life was moving forward, and her husband was choosing to remain behind the lens instead of standing beside her. The arts center slowly became the place where Claire felt most awake, and every visit seemed to pull her further from the quiet shell of her marriage. The people there did not know her as someone's wife or as a woman constantly being filmed, they knew her as Claire, a woman with ideas, emotions, and a voice that mattered. Emma spoke to her with honesty, asking real questions, listening without distraction. Michael, gentle and respectful, treated her thoughts like something valuable, never crossing lines, never making promises, only offering kindness and attention. Claire did not fall into anything forbidden, but her heart responded to the warmth in ways she had forgotten were possible. She noticed how easily she smiled, how her shoulders relaxed, how words flowed without fear of being misunderstood. At home, Daniel remained the same, calm, quiet, distant, his camera still present, his eyes always observing instead of meeting hers. He never argued. He never demanded explanations. His silence felt heavier than anger ever could. One afternoon, Daniel arrived at the center without telling her. Claire saw him standing near the back wall, filming her as she helped Michael arrange paintings for an upcoming show. She felt exposed, not because she was doing anything wrong, but because the most human parts of her were being captured without consent or care. Daniel's face showed no emotion. He didn't interrupt. He didn't greet anyone. He simply recorded. That night, Claire confronted him, asking why he never stepped in, never asked questions, never fought for her attention. Daniel answered honestly, saying he wanted to understand her happiness, to study it, to see where it came from. His words cut deeper than accusations. Claire realized that Daniel was not afraid of losing her, he was willing to document it instead. Days passed, and the pattern continued. Daniel filmed her cooking alone, walking by the lake, staring at her phone with soft smiles she no longer shared with him. Claire felt torn between guilt and clarity. She still cared for Daniel, but she could no longer ignore the truth rising inside her. Love needed presence, not proof. It needed warmth, not observation. The arts center showed her what it felt like to be emotionally seen, and returning home made the absence impossible to deny. Claire began to understand that the danger was not what others offered her, but what her husband no longer did. Each night, as Daniel reviewed his footage while sitting beside her, Claire felt a quiet grief settle in her chest. She realized she was living inside a story where her husband chose to be a witness instead of a partner, and once that understanding took root, it became impossible to unfeel it. Time moved quickly, but the emotional distance in Claire's life grew even faster, turning days into heavy moments that blended together. Daniel continued recording without pause, as if documenting her world could replace being part of it. He filmed mornings where Claire sat silently with her coffee, evenings where she cooked without speaking, and nights where she lay awake while he reviewed footage beside her. He never asked why she was quieter, never noticed how often she stared at nothing, never reached out. The arts center remained her only place of balance, yet even there, a quiet sadness followed her. Emma noticed first, gently asking if she was okay, and Claire smiled without answering. Michael sensed it too, offering kindness without questions, careful not to cross boundaries. Still, the contrast between those simple human connections and her marriage grew sharp. At home, Daniel's presence felt technical, almost distant, as if Claire herself had become part of a long project instead of a life partner. One night, unable to hold the weight any longer, Claire asked Daniel why he never stopped filming, why he never reacted, why he never tried to pull her back. Daniel replied in a flat but honest voice that he didn't want to interfere with her truth, that he believed watching was safer than acting, that recording gave him control over loss. His words revealed more than he realized. Claire understood then that Daniel was afraid, not of losing her, but of feeling. He chose distance because closeness required risk. That realization settled deeply in her chest. Days later, while Daniel was out, Claire opened his computer and watched the videos he had captured. She saw herself laughing with others, her eyes bright and open, then saw the sudden shift when she returned home, her face softer but emptier. She noticed how Daniel framed her like a subject, never once stepping into the picture. The footage was clear, honest, and painful. It showed her transformation better than words ever could. Claire cried quietly, not from anger, but from grief. She mourned the version of love she once believed in. She mourned the years spent hoping he would reach for her instead of the camera. From that moment, clarity replaced confusion. She knew she could not remain in a life where her emotions were observed but not shared. The silence between them grew sharper, no longer confusing, but final. Daniel sensed the change but said nothing, perhaps believing time would settle things. Instead, time pushed Claire forward. She began preparing herself emotionally, not to escape, but to choose herself. Each step felt heavy yet necessary. She understood that love without action slowly becomes absence, and absence, when ignored, becomes goodbye. The final morning arrived without drama, yet it carried more weight than any argument Claire and Daniel had ever avoided. The air was cool, the sky pale, and the house unusually quiet as. Claire moved with purpose, packing only what she truly needed. There was no rush, no panic, only a steady calm built from weeks of clarity. When Daniel entered the room, he noticed immediately what was missing. The camera was not in his hands. Claire was sitting on the couch, waiting, her posture steady, her eyes clear. Daniel asked if he should get the camera, his voice unsure, almost hesitant, and Claire gently said no, explaining that this moment was not meant to be saved, but felt. That single sentence seemed to shake him more than anger ever could. Claire spoke openly, not accusing him, not blaming him, but telling him the truth she had carried quietly for too long. She explained how loneliness can exist even in peace, how being watched without being chosen slowly empties a heart, how she needed presence instead of proof, connection instead of observation. Daniel listened in silence, his face finally unguarded. For the first time, he did not hide behind a lens. He admitted his fear, his habit of controlling moments instead of living them, his mistake in believing that love could be preserved by recording rather than participating. His voice broke when he said he realized too late that by standing back, he had already lost her. Claire felt sadness, but also relief. She told him she did not hate him, that she appreciated the years they shared, but she could not continue living as a subject in her own marriage. She needed space to become whole again. Daniel did not beg, did not argue, and did not reach for the camera. He stood still, understanding that love sometimes means letting go with honesty. When Claire picked up her bag and walked toward the door, she paused, not out of doubt, but respect for what once was. Daniel whispered that he wished he had put the camera down sooner, and Claire answered softly that she wished he had held her instead. She stepped outside, feeling the weight lift as fresh air filled her lungs. Behind her, Daniel remained inside, finally present in a moment he could never replay. The door closed gently, not as an ending filled with anger, but as a quiet conclusion shaped by truth. Claire walked forward, knowing that love is not proven by watching from a distance, but by showing up when it matters most, and for the first time in a long while, her life was no longer being recorded, it was finally being lived.